Yes. So please share with us, Alina, what was it that stood out for you in the conversation today?
Um, what I noticed was the client's language of the way the client's narrative was, and because the client is a deliberate, slow speaker, I knew that the language was coming after a bit of thought. And it wasn't just somebody who talks fast and impulsively, but somebody who was making sense of what he was saying while he was saying it. That gave me a cue that maybe the language of my client is the gateway to his mind. And so, in the first narrative itself, the way the description happened, dream, passion, resurfaced, the dream resurfaced. Then this friends and family, and then uh, the struggle, real hard. So, all of that put together gave me an indicator of the client is really trying to make sense of this dilemma. And then I think the quick nod of the head and the agreement when I said you seem to be at a pause was my little check-in to say, have you kind of given up on that dream, or are you waiting for somebody to unpause you and press the start button again? And that's why I said, seemed like you're on a pause. And he agreed. It was the urgency of the pause to be taken off from pause into play mode again. And that's what I sensed. And that was my pickup to say that then how can this conversation help you, which was the outcome of the conversation. What would you like to explore today, kind of a thing. And um, I think that was one big piece for me. I really liked the fact that the client was able to pick up my questions very beautifully, all of them, and that really helps a coach because uh, we were on the same page. The way he described that little bucket that I defined of what his friends and family were saying. What is that? Because that's I could have named it, but then that would have been my naming of it, and that would have colored the client. And the client had to name it, saying, what role is this bucket of friends and families' viewpoints playing in your narrative? And when he described it himself as safe and secure, for me, it helps. I'm a great fan of being able to put thoughts into bubbles so that they become more manageable to make sense. Otherwise, thoughts are all like, so they become named, labeled bubbles, and that's what I did. Um, that's what I can remember in this conversation. Yeah.
Wow, that's thank you so much for sharing that with us. From what I heard from you, there was that language was the key in today's conversation, and that's perhaps where some of that magic came from as well that the client was talking about, and that there was a real co-creation happening as well, and that also that you really observed the body language of the client and the little nod, for example. Yeah, yes, that's beautiful. And the bubbles, I haven't heard that one before, so I'll definitely remember that. So just to follow up on that, where did you feel there was a shift happening in today's conversation?
I saw a lot of agreement when I resonated or represented what the client was saying in what we call as the bottom line or the heading. Like he talked of achievement is incomplete, and he agreed. I very inadvertently said that the dream needs to become a goal for you, and there was this furious nodding and agreeing, and those were cues for me to say that somehow the client's conscious sense making was coming from there. um, corporate client, I am assuming if things don't make sense, we will not act on them is the value. And then I checked on that value again, and the words again were direction, stretch goals, planning. And I said, okay, here is the language, which if repackaged, is beginning to make sense. So those were a few of my places which were my milestones in the conversation, Lanya.
Excellent. Thank you so much for explaining that, Alina. Yeah, so just wondering, what did you really appreciate in this conversation about our transformative approach at CMA? How can we link today's conversation to that?
So transformative approach is when we make the client take a deeper look at what is not visible on the surface, and the client is unable to articulate something that is nudging them. Transformative shift happens when the client is able to recognize, make conscious sense of it, and then bring it to the table. And thought exists, wisdom exists, but somewhere in the subconscious. For a coach to be able to point the client there and just present it back to the client, for the client to pick up and move forward, was the transformative shift that I was helping to happen, which means that wisdom existed, sense existed, consciousness existed. Bring that to the surface for the client to then start acting on it, to transform the way the client was looking at the dream as an impossibility or something that's really stuck with so many people's viewpoints. It kind of released it from there into another zone. So that transformation is what I'm looking at.
That's beautiful, Alina. That's a beautiful way to explain it to all of us. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we move on, or?
No, I'm good. If there are any questions from any of the students as to why something was done in today's session, I'd love to answer that, because I also don't kind of remember what all I did. I did quite a few things, but if some of you have noted them down, I'd be happy to answer.
That's great. So I think in a little while we'll open up for a Q&A, if that's okay. Okay.